Your position is no longer available, Mrs. Mercer. Unfortunately, circumstances have shifted. I felt my entire body turn numb, as if someone had replaced my blood with frozen water. The HR director's face on my laptop screen displayed absolutely no expression as she delivered the message that would shatter everything I'd spent the last 3 months creating. 3 months of packing, of promising my kids everything would be all right, of convincing my husband this relocation was our future. My name is Leanne Mercer. I'm 37 years old, and exactly 4 days after moving my entire family 2,800 meters across the country, the job I had been assured of disappeared with a single line. Before I continue with how this nightmare unfolded, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you haven't already. Trust me, you'll want to hear where this ends. I remember sitting there in our half-unpacked rental house, surrounded by boxes labeled in my careful handwriting. Kitchen, Noah's room, Ellie's books, staring at this woman who looked uneasy, but nowhere near uneasy enough for what she was doing to my life. I don't understand, I said, my voice sounding embarrassingly small. I signed a contract. We sold our house in Portland. My husband stepped down from his practice. We enrolled our children in schools here. She cleared her throat. Helix Dynamics has made some restructuring choices. The integration team is being reduced before it even launches. Legal has advised we can terminate within the probationary window. You'll receive 2 weeks of severance as a courtesy. A courtesy. 2 weeks of pay as a courtesy after we'd uprooted our entire lives to move from Oregon to North Carolina. Can I speak with Marcus? I asked, referring to the CTO who'd recruited me, who'd spent months assuring me that my expertise in healthcare data integration was exactly what they needed for their growing medical records division. Marcus is no longer with the company, she said plainly. That's when I realized this wasn't just about me. This was a company in free fall, slashing costs wherever possible. I was collateral damage in someone else's financial cleanup. I wish I could say I defended myself, that I threatened legal action or demanded real compensation, but shock does strange things to a person. Instead, I thanked her, actually thanked her for informing me. I wished her well and ended the call. Then I walked into our bathroom, turned on the shower, sat down on the tile floor, and cried until the water turned cold. How was I going to tell Chris? My husband had given up his physical therapy practice of 12 years, his patients, his co-workers, the clinic he'd helped build from nothing. All because I'd convinced him this opportunity at Helix was worth it. It's a director-level role, I'd told him. The salary is enough that you can take your time finding the right practice here. Maybe even open your own. And our kids. God, our kids. Noah was 15 and already furious with me for making him leave his friends before his sophomore year. Ellie was 8 and struggling with dyscalculia, a math learning disability that had taken us 2 years to get properly identified and supported at her old school. We'd been assured the private school here in Raleigh had resources for her. The tuition deposit alone was non-refundable at $3,800. I sat on that freezing bathroom floor for what felt like hours, my mind running through calculations. Our savings would cover maybe 3 months if we were careful. The housing market in Portland had exploded after we sold. We couldn't afford to return even if we wanted to. Chris couldn't reclaim his old job. They'd already found his replacement. I heard the front door open. Chris was back from taking the kids to tour their new schools. "Lee, you home?" His voice echoed through our hollow rental. I turned off the shower and caught my reflection in the mirror, eyes swollen, face blotchy. There was no hiding this. When I told them, Chris just sank heavily onto one of our kitchen boxes. He didn't speak for a long time. Noah kicked the wall hard enough to leave a dent we'd never get back from our security deposit. Ellie climbed into my lap and asked if this meant we could go home. I didn't have the courage to tell her we didn't have a home to return to. That night, after the kids were asleep, Chris and I sat on our mattress on the floor, since we hadn't even put our bed frame together yet. "What are we going to do?" he asked, staring up at the ceiling, while I had spent the afternoon firing off desperate emails to my contacts, updating my LinkedIn, and applying to every remotely relevant job in the Raleigh area. "I'll find something else," I told him with far more confidence than I actually felt. "I have interviews lined up already." Technically, that was true. One interview with a company offering 40% less than what Helix had promised. "And if you don't?" he asked. I didn't answer. We both knew what retail and food service positions paid. We both knew what Ellie's special education needs cost. And we both knew how dangerously thin our safety net had become. The next morning, I did something I'm not proud of. I drove to Helix Dynamics' gleaming headquarters, the building I'd toured just 4 months earlier, where I'd met the team I'd never lead, where Marcus had shown me the corner office that should have been mine. I sat in the parking lot for nearly an hour, rehearsing what I'd say if I stormed inside demanding to speak to whoever was in charge. I imagined myself firm but professional, imagined them realizing their massive mistake, imagined countless things that would never actually happen. In the end, I didn't go in. Instead, I drove to a coffee shop and spent 6 hours applying for jobs, making connections, and fighting the rising panic threatening to drown me. 3 weeks passed. Rejection after rejection rolled in. Overqualified, not the right fit, chose an internal candidate. Chris found part-time work at a rehab center, barely enough to cover groceries. Noah stopped speaking to me entirely. Ellie's new school called about adjustment issues. Then I got a call from Daria Novak at Meridian Health Systems, Helix's biggest competitor. "I heard what happened," she said. "Helix is a disaster right now. Half their leadership team has walked out." "I noticed," I replied dryly. "We have a position that might interest you. Not director level, but senior manager. The compensation package is competitive." It was 15% less than what Helix had offered, but 30% higher than anything else I'd found. I scheduled the interview for the next day. That same evening, my phone lit up with a North Carolina number I didn't recognize. "Is this Leanne Mercer?" a man asked, his voice tight and exhausted. "Yes. Who's calling?" "James Alderson, CEO of Helix Dynamics." My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my fingertips. "Mr. Alderson, what can I do for you?" "I've just learned about your situation, the termination of your contract," he said, sounding genuinely uneasy. "I want to personally apologize. This should never have occurred." "I appreciate that," I replied carefully, refusing to give him anything more. "The fact is, Mrs. Mercer, we're in a difficult position. The medical conversion project is 6 weeks behind schedule. The client is threatening to pull out entirely. Our interim integration director doesn't understand the proprietary architecture, and the documentation is insufficient." I almost laughed. I knew exactly what he was talking about. Marcus and I had discussed the meter project extensively. It was a $40 million contract to migrate a regional hospital network's patient data to Helix's platform. It was also the main reason they'd recruited me. I'd done similar migrations 3 times before. "That sounds challenging," I said, my voice neutral. "We'd like to bring you on as a consultant to help navigate this situation. Premium rates, of course. Triple your original salary. Prorated for the 8-week project duration." Now, I did laugh, a short, sharp sound that made him pause. "Mr. Alderson, 4 weeks ago, your company left my family financially devastated and emotionally shattered. My 15-year-old son isn't speaking to me. My 8-year-old daughter cries herself to sleep. My husband gave up a 12-year career. And now you want me to bail you out of a crisis I specifically warned Marcus about during my interviews." Silence on the line. "Then I understand your frustration." "No, you don't," I cut in. "But thank you for the offer. I wish you the best of luck with Medicor." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my phone. Chris looked up from the job listings he'd been scrolling through. "Who is that?" "Helix," I said. "They need help with Medicare." His eyes widened. "What did you tell them?" I told them no. "Lee." He ran his hands through his hair. "We need the money. I have an interview with Meridian tomorrow. And if that doesn't pan out, we have 6 weeks of mortgage payments left before we're completely underwater." He was right. But something had crystallized inside me during that call. A cold, clear certainty. "I'm not helping them," I said. "Not after what they did." Chris didn't argue further, but I could see the worry lines deepening around his eyes. I barely slept that night. By morning, I'd made a decision that would either save us or sink us completely. The interview with Meridian went well. Daria was sharp, direct, and clearly valued my experience. But when she asked if I had any questions, I took a deep breath and stepped off a cliff. "Actually, I'm considering starting my own consultancy," I said. "Would Meridian be open to contracting with an independent firm rather than hiring me directly?" Daria studied me for a long moment. "Potentially? What services would your firm provide? Specialized integration of healthcare data systems, migration management, compliance oversight. The same expertise you'd be hiring me for, but with more flexibility for both parties." "And this firm exists?" "As of this morning." I slid my newly printed business card across the table. Nexus Integration Solutions. I'd stayed up until 3 a.m. registering the business, creating a simple website, and designing those cards at a 24-hour print shop. It was a gamble so massive it made my stomach hurt. Daria picked up the card, her expression unreadable. "Bold move, Leanne." "It's either bold or desperate," I admitted. "I'm not sure which yet." She actually smiled at that. "Let me discuss this with my team. A consultancy arrangement might solve several issues for us, especially given Helix's current difficulties." As I drove home, my phone rang again. James Alderson. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. The fourth time, I answered. "Mrs. Mercer, please reconsider. The medical situation is deteriorating. We're prepared to offer you a permanent position, director level, with a significant signing bonus to compensate for the disruption." "Mr. Alderson," I said calmly, "I'm no longer available for employment offers. However, my consultancy, Nexus Integration Solutions, might be able to assist you. Our standard rate for crisis intervention is $400 per hour with a minimum commitment of 200 hours. The silence on his end was deafening. "That's more than double what we were offering." "Yes," I agreed. "It is, and I require 50% upfront, non-refundable. If you're interested, I can have a contract to you this afternoon. If not, I wish you the best with Medicare." "This feels punitive, Mrs. Mercer." "Not at all," I said, my voice honey-sweet. "This is simply the market rate for solving the problem you created. My family has expenses. My business has overhead. You're welcome to find another solution if mine doesn't work for you." I hung up and pulled into our driveway, heart hammering. Had I just destroyed our last chance at financial recovery, or had I finally found a way to reclaim control? Inside, Chris was waiting, his face tense. "How did it go with Meridian?" I set my purse down carefully. "I told them I'm starting my own company." His expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something close to anger. "You did what?" And Helix just called again. "I told them they could hire my company at $400 an hour." "Lee," his voice cracked, "have you lost your mind? We can't afford to gamble like this." "I know it sounds crazy," I said, taking his hands. "But think about it. They're desperate. Medicare is their biggest client. If they lose this contract, they'll be in serious trouble. And I'm the only one who can fix their problem in time. And if they say no, Meridian might become my first client instead." Daria seemed interested. Chris pulled his hands away, pacing our small living room. This is our lives. You're gambling with our children's security. I know, I whispered, but I can't go back to working for people who treated us like we were disposable. I can't. My phone buzzed with an email from James Alderson. We accept your terms. Contract needed ASAP. Medicor representatives arriving Monday. I showed the email to Chris, whose eyes widened. They actually agreed to $400 an hour. They did. I felt lightheaded. That's $80,000 for 6 weeks of work. If you deliver, he reminded me, I will. I'd never been more certain of anything. And this was just the beginning. Chris stared at me like he was seeing someone new. Maybe he was. Maybe I was becoming someone new. Someone who wouldn't be broken by betrayal, but instead would rebuild something stronger from the pieces. That night, I sat at our kitchen table drafting the contract that would either save us or become evidence of my hubris. I included clauses about intellectual property, scope limitations, payment schedules. I was creating armor, protecting myself from ever being vulnerable to these people again. My phone buzzed with another email, this time from Daria at Meridian. Proposal approved. Can you meet Thursday to discuss specifics? Particularly interested in your insights on Helix's Medicor implementation. I stared at the screen, a plan crystallizing in my mind. Not revenge exactly. Something more elegant, something that would transform the power dynamic permanently. I was going to make myself essential to both companies. I was going to build my consultancy on the very expertise that Helix had discarded. And I was going to make sure they never forgot the woman they thought they could simply erase. I woke up the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt since before the move. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel that crushing weight on my chest, that sense of drowning while everyone watched. Instead, I felt something unfamiliar, a cold, precise focus. I spent that entire day working out exactly how to thread this needle. Helix needed me to save their medical project, their biggest client, a hospital network whose entire patient database needed migration to their system. Meridian wanted insights on Helix's architecture, not quite industrial espionage, but dancing along that edge. I wasn't going to betray either one. I would serve both exceptionally well while ensuring my own interests were protected in ways they couldn't imagine yet. By Sunday night, I had 2 separate contracts finalized. The Helix one stipulated I would only work remotely with limited on-site appearances. The Meridian contract carefully outlined consultation on industry best practices without specifically mentioning Helix. Both contracts included language about my ownership of any processes or tools I developed. On Monday morning, my first official day as the founder and CEO of Nexus Integration Solutions, I sat at our dining room table, my new office, with my laptop open, wearing a blouse I'd ironed for the first time in weeks. Chris paused on his way out to a physical therapy shift. You sure about this? He asked. I nodded, though my stomach was churning with doubt. First payment from Helix should hit our account by noon. $40,000. He let out a long breath. And if they realize they're paying you to work for their competitor. I'm not working for their competitor. I'm consulting for 2 separate clients on non-overlapping projects, I said, looking him in the eye. I've reviewed the contracts a dozen times. Everything I'm doing is legal and ethical. Maybe not completely ethical, a small voice whispered, but I silenced it. When Chris left, I closed my eyes for a moment, gathering myself, then dialed into the Helix emergency meeting about Medicor. The integration pathway is fundamentally flawed, I explained to the team of engineers who'd been flailing for weeks. Your architecture assumes a linear patient data model, but Medicor uses a worked model with branching relational elements. That's not what our analysis showed, stammered Raj, the interim director they'd appointed. Your analysis missed key structural elements in their legacy system, I said, not unkindly, but firmly. I shared my screen showing the revised architecture I'd spent the weekend developing. There was silence as they absorbed what I'd presented. "This will require rebuilding half the integration layer," one engineer finally said. "Yes," I agreed, "but it's the only way to make the migration work within Metacore's timeline." "How did you identify this so quickly?" Raj asked, a note of suspicion in his voice. "I've handled 3 similar migrations. This pattern is something you learn to recognize." What I didn't say was that I'd already spotted this issue during my interviews with Marcus months ago. I'd mentioned it as a potential concern. No one had listened. By Wednesday, I had both companies dependent on my expertise. Helix's team was implementing my redesign for Metacore. Meridian was crafting a new business strategy based on my insights about healthcare data architecture trends, insights that would position them to capture clients dissatisfied with Helix's services. At home, things were starting to heal. With the first payment from Helix, we'd caught up on bills. Chris found a physical therapy practice interested in bringing him on as a partner rather than an employee, a better opportunity than he'd had in Portland. Noah still barely spoke to me, but I'd seen him looking at me differently when I was on video calls, commanding respect from executives at companies that had once intimidated me. Ellie crawled into my lap one evening as I was reviewing code. "Are you the boss now, Mommy?" I smoothed her hair. "I guess I am, sweetheart." "Good," she said firmly, "because you're smarter than all of them." 2 weeks into my contracts, the inevitable happened. James Alderson requested an urgent call. "Mrs. Mercer, Leanne, we have a situation," he began, his voice tight. "It's come to our attention that you may be consulting for Meridian Health Systems concurrently with your work for us." I'd prepared for this moment. "That's correct," I said calmly. "Nexus Integration Solutions has multiple clients in the healthcare sector." "This represents a clear conflict of interest," he said. "No, it doesn't," I interrupted. "My contract with Helix specifically addresses this. Section 7.3 states that I may provide services to other clients, including competitors, provided I maintain confidentiality of proprietary information. I've adhered to that completely. The intent is clearly spelled out in the language your legal team approved. If you're concerned about the arrangement, you're welcome to terminate our contract," I added. "Of course, the initial payment is non-refundable, and you'd still need to resolve the medical issues within the next 4 weeks." Silence stretched between us. We both knew he had no choice. The medical deadline was immovable, and I was more than halfway through implementing a solution no one else on his team fully understood. "I want daily progress reports," he finally said, as specified in the contract. I agreed pleasantly. After hanging up, I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. I'd stood my ground. I hadn't raised my voice or shown anger. I'd simply refused to be intimidated. My phone buzzed with a text from Daria at Meridian. "Heard Alderson called you? Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I replied. "Still on for tomorrow's strategy session." 3 weeks later, I delivered the completed Metacore integration architecture to Helix, 2 weeks ahead of schedule. The migration test ran perfectly. The Metacore executives were so impressed they increased their contract value with Helix by 30%. James Alderson called me personally. "The board is extremely pleased with the outcome," he said, sounding like the words cost him physically. "We'd like to discuss retaining Nexus for ongoing support." "I'd be happy to send over our standard long-term contract," I said. "My rates have adjusted based on market demand." I quoted a figure 20% higher than my crisis rate, and he didn't even hesitate. "Draft the paperwork." 2 days later, I finished my strategic roadmap presentation for Meridian, and Daria was thrilled. "This positions us beautifully to expand into the exact market gaps where Helix is weak," she said. "The board wants to offer you an exclusive contract." "I appreciate that," I replied, "but Nexus's model depends on serving multiple clients across the field. I'm happy to prioritize Meridian's work, but I can't accept exclusivity." She studied me through the video call. "You're consulting for Helix long-term now, aren't you?" I smiled. "My client roster is confidential, as you know." She laughed softly. "Clever. Very clever." 6 months after Helix so casually discarded me, my consulting firm had 5 specialists, people I'd collaborated with over the years who were eager to join a company that actually valued their expertise. We held contracts with 7 major healthcare systems, including both Helix and Meridian. We'd moved from our rental to a home we purchased in a good school district. Ellie had the support she needed. Noah had made friends on the high school track team, and Chris was thriving in his new practice. As for me, I was working harder than ever, but on my own terms. No one could fire me. No one could uproot my family again. I had rebuilt something solid from the wreckage Helix left behind. One rainy Tuesday, I received a calendar invite from James Alderson. "Quarterly business review. Standard for our ongoing relationship." What wasn't standard was the location. A downtown coffee shop? Not Helix headquarters or a video meeting. I showed up 5 minutes early, ordered a cappuccino, and chose a table with a clear view of the door. James arrived looking distinctly uneasy outside the corporate bubble, his tailored suit out of place in the casual setting. "Thanks for meeting me," he said after ordering. "I wanted to discuss something off the record." "Go ahead," I said, the weight of the past month settling behind my ribs. He inhaled deeply. "I'm leaving Helix. The board has asked me to step down." I kept my expression neutral, though surprise flickered through me. "I'm sorry to hear that." He shook his head. "Don't be. It's been coming since the Medicare crisis. The truth is, the company's been mismanaged for years. Letting you go was just one symptom of a larger failure." "Why are you telling me this?" He met my eyes. "Because the board is considering offering you the CTO position." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Come again?" "You've shown extraordinary technical leadership. The entire integration division now runs on your architecture. The board understands firing you was a colossal mistake." The irony was so sharp I almost laughed. "I'm not interested in being an employee again, James. Nexus is profitable and growing." "They're prepared to acquire Nexus," he said quietly. "Full valuation plus a 3-year leadership contract at double your current consulting rate." This time, I did laugh. Soft, stunned, disbelieving. "They want to buy the company they unintentionally created by firing me?" He looked genuinely ashamed. "Essentially, yes." I sipped my coffee slowly, remembering all the sleepless nights, the tears, the fear their careless decision had inflicted on my family. Now they wanted to buy back not just my expertise, but my loyalty. "Tell the board I'm flattered," I said evenly. "But Nexus isn't for sale, not to Helix, not to anyone." "They'll offer more," he warned. "It's not about the money," I replied. "It's about never again placing my family's security in someone else's hands." He nodded. "I understand. And I owe you an apology. What happened to you and your family was unacceptable. I should have stepped in." "Yes," I said quietly. "You should have." We finished our coffee talking industry trends and familiar contacts. As we left, he paused at the door. "One more thing. You should know Meridian is also preparing an acquisition offer for Nexus." I smiled. "I'm aware." His eyebrows rose. "And they'll get the same answer," I added. "Nexus stays independent." Walking to my car, a sense of closure washed over me. This had never truly been about revenge. It was about rebuilding not just my career or my family's stability, but my own sense of power and autonomy. 3 weeks later, I signed a joint venture with a small but innovative health tech startup founded by 3 women who'd endured similar corporate betrayals. Together, we launched a platform that helped hospitals manage patient data more efficiently than either Helix or Meridian could. Medicor became our first client. Helix's second largest client became our second. The day we announced the venture, I received a text from Marcus, my former recruiter at Helix. Saw the news. Poetic justice. Proud of you. I didn't reply. I didn't need his validation anymore. That evening, I sat on our deck watching Noah and Chris toss a football while Ellie practiced cartwheels in the grass. My phone buzzed with another partnership inquiry from a hospital eager to break free of Helix. "Everything okay?" Chris asked, noticing me glance at my phone. "Everything's perfect," I said, setting it aside. And for the first time in a very long while, I meant it. The company that thought I was disposable had unknowingly created its fiercest competitor. The job they took from me forced me to build something far more valuable. The security they ripped away had been replaced by something no one could ever steal. That wasn't revenge. That was justice. And justice, I learned, is far sweeter than revenge could ever be. Have you ever been betrayed by a company you trusted? How did you rebuild afterward? Would you have handled things differently? Sometimes our greatest strengths emerge only after we've been broken apart and have no choice but to rebuild ourselves. If this story resonated, hit subscribe and share your corporate horror stories in the comments. Remember, the best revenge isn't destroying others, it's becoming someone they can't ignore and can never control again.